Okay, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the American TESOL Free Friday webinar. My name is David Dodgson. I'm filling in this week for Shelley Terrell, who is unavailable this week as she is attending a conference in Paris, in France. So lucky Shelley, she gets to spend her weekend in Paris. Okay, well, today I'm going to be talking a little bit about um, giving feedback and correcting errors in written work, focusing mainly on young language learners. Now, first, I know there are just a few of you in the room at the moment, but I'd just like to see what kind of language learners, which age groups you work with. So if you could just type in A, B, C, D, or E, whichever one applies to you. Okay, so Faisal, you're working with high school and university prep. Okay. Okay, I assume with middle school. Yeah, I have middle school students as well this year. I'm split between primary school and middle school. Okay, Javari, you're not teaching at the moment. I see. Okay. Well, which kind of learners were you working with before? Okay. Ah, so you're still a trainee. Well, hopefully this will come in useful for your future teaching. Okay, well, most of my experience, I've generally worked with primary school and middle school language learners, so they're very much at an elementary stage when it comes to writing, which is where I'll focus a lot of this session on. But I believe a lot of the things are applicable to different levels and different age groups, and I'm sure you'll get something useful out of it. Now, first, I'd like you to take your teacher's approach. This, I hope you can see it clearly. This is a sample of a writing activity from one of my classrooms. It's a straightforward task. At this kind of age group, we just expect them to write some short paragraphs, nothing too long. And yeah, this is fairly typical of the kind of work that's returned to me. So you just take a moment, just look at that. Imagine as a teacher, you're handed a piece of work like this and you're going about marking it or correcting it. So if you're just in the chat box, right, what kind of things would you mention to this student? What would you point out to this student when checking this work? Just use the chat box. Just what would you mention to the student? What comment would you give them? Is there anything in particular you would pick out? Okay, yeah, there are some spelling mistakes. First, what do you mean by proper names? I did actually because my school asked me to. I did blank out the names she used. Okay, grammar mistakes. Well, what kind of grammar mistakes can you see? Yeah, good. Yeah, we got that. That's a classic error amongst Turkish students, at least. She's goes. Yeah, there's some things with yeah, some capital letters that are maybe in the wrong place. Okay, yes, a few punctuation errors. Yeah, these are the kind of things as teachers we generally tend to pick up on when we're looking at writing. Grammar mistakes, spelling, punctuation, these kind of things. What quite often happens when we sit down to correct something like this, quite often we will hand something like this back to the students. So we will underline some of those grammar mistakes. We'll maybe put a few little symbols or notes in. We'll cross out words that shouldn't be there. And things like that. Or we'll use these little codes to note spelling mistakes. Now, if you just take yourself out of the student's position and put yourself into the student's position, sorry. If you take yourself out of the teacher's position, put yourself into the student's position, what would you think? What would you think when you got this back? The student who wrote this was 10 years old. So imagine if you're 10 years old, what would you think if your teacher returned this to you? Okay, shocked. Yes. Well, yeah, there's always that comment about red pen. Personally, I don't think it's the color that's the problem. It's what's done with the pen. Yeah, this is the thing. If we're stressing up every mistake, yeah, if we're drawing their attention to every mistake, it can kind of be demoralizing. I mean, actually, I think this writing is not too bad. It's pretty good for the level the student is at. But if you give this back, they can easily think, oh no, my writing is terrible. And then we put in a comment like this, good, but be careful with spelling. Remember, she goes, not she's goes. This kind of thing, I think, yeah, can be kind of demoralizing for the students. They can then just put it away and never look at it again. So yeah, if you put yourself in the learner's shoes, especially when we're dealing with children, these are the kind of things we need to think about. And as I said, this is kind of what happens a lot. We collect the written work, we mark it, we return it with the corrections written on, and then the paper gets put back in a file, and yeah, it rarely gets seen again. So one thing, this started to trouble me because I noticed that my students, they were often demotivated to write. If you ask them, what's your least favorite part of an English lesson, they will usually say writing. Or you ask them to write something, they say, oh, no, not writing, please, teacher. So I started to look at ways that I could motivate my students more. So this is what I started to do, a focus on content. If we look back to the previous example I gave you here, the student has written about their best friend. So this is something personal. But here the corrections have been made, a comment about the spelling and the grammar has been made. But there's no reaction at all to actually what the student has written. It's like they've told us something, but we haven't listened. So what I started to do was, if I got a piece of writing like this, the first time I return this to the student, I will not focus on their mistakes so much. I will focus rather on actually what they wrote. And so I would return the writing with something like this. So I would give these kind of comments. So here I'm responding to what the student has written. I think this is something which is often overlooked. As language teachers, we focus on the language, on the grammar side, a little bit too much. So I'll say, for example, yeah, I really enjoyed this. I want to know more. So we mention a rabbit in the paragraph. So ask a question about that. They mention fish. So what kind of fish? Asking for some more details about that. Please tell me more. I think this is the most important thing. So what I always tell my students, these young students, when they write, is I try to get them used to the fact that every task they will have to write 2 times, at least 2 times. The first time, they can write their ideas. Quite often, they might write something short. Then I will give them some comments like this, and I'll ask them to go back and write their paragraph again and try to make it a bit longer, try to respond to the things I've said. Well, Javaria, with the age group I'm dealing with, I mean, their writing skills haven't been developed enough to have a specific creative writing class yet, maybe. But I think, yeah, as I said just a moment ago, too often the focus, there's too much focus on the language sometimes, and we need to actually focus on what the students are telling us at the same time. In this way, I think it makes the feedback part of the process of writing, not the end point. So the students write something, they receive some comments, they make a response, and then they maybe revisit their work and they write it again. Yes, exactly, Faisal. You need critical thinking. So we need to encourage the students to revisit their work. This is one problem I find a lot, is students quite often never look at their written work again once they've completed it. So this is also a way to get them to look in more detail at what they've written. Okay, so where are you from, Javaria? Ah, in Pakistan. Okay. Well, I assume in Pakistan, correct me if I'm wrong, but I assume you have a higher level of English input from an earlier age, perhaps. But that's good. It's good to get them writing creatively as early as possible. So that's one thing. I try to get them involved in this process of feedback, a process of dialogue. What I find quite often happens is I will return comments like this, maybe orally or maybe in written form. The student will respond to them. They will come and tell me more things about the things I asked, and then I encourage them to redraft their work, including these new ideas. But still, yeah, this is a language class. Still, we're talking about a foreign language. Error correction still needs to play a role. So where does it fit in? Well, there are many different approaches to error correction. I'm going to be focusing on one I find to be most effective with this age group right now. I don't know, maybe you could tell me through the chat box, normally, how would you focus on error correction with a piece of written work? Anybody have any ideas to share? How would you focus on errors? So yeah, talking about the language errors, how would you focus on language errors made by your students? Perhaps Would you just annotate their work? Would you try to find some way to highlight general problems? Okay, you'd mention the errors in class. Okay, so maybe mention them. Yeah, mentioning them generally, the kind of common errors. Good. Yes, of course. Yeah, without putting any particular student on the spot. Yeah, good. Open class error correction. Yeah. So, Faisal, do you mean that you would get some kind of peer correction? You would get the students to exchange their work, or you'd have them work on it together in some way? Okay, good. Good. Well, I'm going to skip through this error correction code as it seems a good peer correction. It seems no one is really using error correction too much. Well, the way I go about it, I kind of try to find a collaborative solution. I greatly believe learning takes place more effectively when people work together as a group. There are many things people can teach each other, even if they are novices in the way our language learners often are. So one thing I will do, a collaborative solution, the kind of thing Faisal mentioned with open error correction. If I have a class of, for example, 10 students, as I correct their work, I will be looking for common errors that they are all making. And then, using those errors, I will create a paragraph. I'll create a paragraph of my own, but containing errors that the students have made. And then, in groups, I get them to correct it. So this is anonymous. We're not putting any student on the spot, but we're using their real mistakes. We're using the mistakes that they have made. Now, there are different ways I go about this. I'm going to share one of them with you now, get you to do a little activity for me. I'm hoping this will work. Okay, I'm just going to share a link in the chat box. If you could click on this link, a window should open with a paragraph in it. So you just click on that link for me. Just if you just type in the chat box to let me know that that has opened in your web browser. Okay, good. So you should see here a paragraph I've made based on my students writing about their best friend. So I think you can spot some mistakes here. Now what you can do with this website, it's called Will You Type With Me? Each person can choose a different color. Each person is assigned a different color, and you can make corrections. So if you're just looking at that now, you see, for example, the first thing, she's name is Tina. We can correct that to her. And you see, when I make the correction, my correction appears in green. So I'd like you to just take a look at that. We can all do this together collaboratively. Just find some mistakes. Any mistakes you find, feel free to correct them. Spelling mistakes, grammar mistakes, punctuation mistakes, anything like that. Just click anywhere on that document, on that paragraph, or one of those sentences, and you can change. Yeah, okay, good. Yeah, there's a spelling mistake there. Beautiful. Turkish students often miss out the U. Okay, is there anything else there? Ah, good, yeah. We had a misplaced article there, an unnecessary article. Good, yeah, there. She always smiling. We changed to she is always smiling. Yes, good. She's got big green eyes and is tall. We're missing the auxiliary verb there. So what I do in class is I get my students working on this in groups, usually groups of 3, groups of 4. Together, I'll tell them to read through, identify the mistakes, and change them. And I find when they work collaboratively like this, they really can find pretty much all of the mistakes. And just watching the way they work together sometimes is quite fascinating. I mean, really, they can think about the language on a level that we quite often don't give them credit for. Now, obviously here we're doing this in an online setting, so you can't easily communicate with each other while you're doing this. But as I said, in the classroom, they will communicate with each other. So what I do in class, as I said, they work on this in groups. When they've finished, quite often on the class computer, on the projector screen, I will display a paragraph using this "Will you type with me?" And I'll invite them to come up one at a time and change the mistakes. The reason I do that is, as you see, when you correct a mistake, it's highlighted in a particular color. So that's a great way to visually show where the mistakes are to the students. And, you know, that makes it much easier for them then to translate that back to their writing. Good, so you've had a good go there. You've found most of the mistakes. Good. If you could return to the Adobe Connect room. Yeah. I'll finish the presentation. But yeah, that's definitely a tool you should think about using for this kind of thing in class. Will you type with me? As I said, even if you don't, you're not having your students work on separate computers, just to check the answers is a good way to visually represent the corrections with the colors. So you can see on the slide here, this is just an outline of how I go about this. An alternative to Will You Type With Me, you could use Google Docs. Of course, if you're offline on the smart board or the projection screen, you could just show a Word file and have them correct that. Or to really go back to basics, you could just write it on the board and with different colored marker pens, get them to come up and make the corrections. But the key thing that the students must do for this to have the full effect, when this exercise is finished, they have to go back to their own work and look for similar mistakes. I find if they do that, that really brings it full circle. So you've taken their individual work, you've used it to create this generic paragraph for everyone to correct. Then you send them back to their own work, and quite often they will look at the exercise they've just done, they will look at their own work, and they will be able to self-correct. Now, I've done presentations on this subject or similar subjects on a few occasions, and questions I'm often asked are along the following lines. One, doesn't it take a lot of time, both in the preparation and in class? And the answer is yes, it does, but I really believe it's worth it. The program in the school I work at, it was in previous years packed with all sorts of different writing activities. I've kind of thinned that out a bit, so we have fewer writing activities than we used to, but we spend more time on them. So we spend more time going through this process, and I really think it produces good results. The other thing people often say, you know, young children, I quite often deal with kids who are 8, 9, 10, 11 years old. Can they really think critically in this way? Oh, hello, my cat has decided to make an appearance for the end of the session. He likes webinars a lot. Anyway, excuse me. Yes, you'd be surprised quite often. The level, if you give kids the opportunity, the level at which they can think critically is quite surprising. Also, during the collaborative phase, when they're working together, people often ask me, well, don't they then just speak in their own language a lot rather than English? The answer is yes, they do. My students do speak Turkish a lot as they're making the corrections. But so what? They are focusing on some writing in English, and they are making those corrections in the right way. So it does help them think about the target language, even if they're discussing it in their own language. But the main thing I'm getting at, I'll leave you with this quote. I think this sums up everything about my approach in writing here. Quite often when we're going over and we're correcting the mistakes with red pen by ourselves, this is the same as giving the kids cut flowers. We should be teaching them to grow their own plants. So we should be teaching them to look for mistakes themselves, to self-edit, and to self-correct. Okay, so that's all from me this evening. Once again, I apologize for the mix-up about the start time. If you do have any questions, please raise your hand. Okay, and I will try to give you the microphone. Okay, that's all I think you...
Hello. You can say yes, right in chat box. You can write yes. If you hear me. Yeah. Thanks for this great webinar about writing. Really, because you know that I mean, teaching writing for non-speakers. I mean, for non-natives, it will be so difficult and tough. The toughest skill to teach, for example, Arab students. I really face the same problem that while now I'm teaching in Saudi Arabia, and I'm teaching the university level students. But really, we face a great problem that teaching them writing. But I think that this is a great topic that when you ask students to write about their best friend. But I think that sometimes if you want to teach students to write a paragraph, I think that you have to teach them first to how to write sentences. I think that we can, for example, let me take, for example, if we ask students to write a paragraph about their family, so we can do some kind of pre-writing tasks. This is very important. So, for example, we can give them, a kind of questions, and then just to write. Well, the thing that we can do that, so we need them to collect and gather information before writing. A paragraph about their family or city, about their best friend or whatever. And then the first thing that we need them to collect information, get information from about each other. For example, if we want them to write a paragraph about their family, so we can ask, for example, what's your first name, what's your last name, what's your father's name, what's your mother's name, and then how many brothers and sisters do you have, where do you live, who do you live with. So kind of certain questions that we need to collect information about themselves. And the other thing that we can do, we can explain the relationships between family members. I think that you got me. And then the other thing that we can write, that we can build sentences first. So when we get the information, so like for example, what's your first name? Like Ahmed. So and then we ask them to write complete sentences. My first name is Ahmed. And then what's your father's name? My father's name is Ali, for example. So, and then because you know that a paragraph is a group of related sentences. So first we have to teach them, how to build sentences, because you know that this is not for me, for my students, but all students sometimes are weak at writing. The second thing that I wanna say about uh, corrections. I mean, really, students don't like whether you correct the mistakes by red, or it doesn't mean the color that you use. But I mean, they don't like to correct every mistake. You will, because you will, I mean, demotivate them by this. I mean, for me, I try to focus, for example, for this week, I try to focus on spellings, for example. So try to correct spelling. And these matter next, for example, next week we can, focus on other things like um, punctuation or whatever, because students don't like that they get back their, papers or marked with red or with whatever. They don't like to, put lines and under each mistake that they did. The thing that I can do for my students, they can correct each other. First, they can correct. We can use self-correction. First, we start with self-correction, and then they can exchange. As I said, that you're right. This is a great idea that they can exchange. The paragraphs without anonymous. Without names, or they can do it. Uh, the thing that you did with your students in a collaborative work. But the thing that I don't like about collaborative, that by this you enhance them discussing or in L1, for example. This is the problem that I faced when the coordinator came and observed me for scale, and then I asked them to just to work in groups and discuss scanning and skimming. And then the thing that he put this is as a negative uh, point on me, that students discuss in L1. I told them the thing that you're right, yes, but why not? But I told them that whether they discuss it, in Arabic or whatever. But the thing that when they ask them to answer, they will answer in English, not in Arabic. But the thing that I can, reduce this um, and minimize speaking, the students discussing or writing or discussing in Arabic, or L1, is that I can remind them, just forget about Arabic and then try to discuss or speak in English, and that's it. Thank you very much.
Okay, well, thank you, Faisal, for your comments. Yeah, I mean, obviously, writing is a very complex process. There are many things that go into it. As you rightly say, we need focus on the planning stage and brainstorming ideas, and then also first, of course, they need to start with writing words, writing sentences, and build everything from there. And of course, there are many different approaches we can use. I think it's always important to mix things up with peer editing and self-correction and things like that. One of my goals with the kind of activities and the kind of ideas I presented to you this evening is, because I am working with younger learners, is to start them off on that path, to introduce the idea to them of critically thinking about their writing and revisiting and redrafting their writing. As for the discussions in L1, I mean, that's a difficult one, of course. Quite often we discuss that there are some benefits to using L1 in the class, but this isn't always seen in the same manner by our supervisors and superiors, which, as you said there with your observation, can cause issues sometimes. One thing, again, because of the age of my learners, quite often they don't possess the meta language to be talking about errors in that detail. So I'm happy to let it go as long as they do actually get their corrections done. Okay, I think Marcella has a question or wants to say something. So I'll just give you the microphone rights. Okay, Marcella, you're listening. Hello, Marcella. I've activated your microphone, so you should be able to speak to the room now. Oh, you can. No, Marcella, we can.